My name is Dizu Plaatjies, and I'm a musician, and I'm a composer, I'm a band leader, and I'm a professor of African music at UCT. Now, one thing that I would like to share with people is that most people, as you know, that African music is the music that is mainly supported by white people. You can go anywhere else in the world. The white people are the ones who are promoting and supporting African music, our own music. Because if you are going to Europe, you'll find the Europeans. You come to South Africa, also it's the Europeans. So I decided that because of, it seems as if our people, they are ignoring what is theirs. That is the biggest time bomb that we are sitting with. Because my music is not, I'm not selling like all those guys who are playing rock and pop and what. We recorded an album with Amampondo in 1983. It took 20 years to sell 20,000 copies. You see? That is why I'm saying that African music is supported by white people, period. I don't care who says what. You can come from the moon, from where, but let me tell you, it goes like that. Then after that, I said, I don't want my music to sit on the shelves. No, I've got to mix now my music with other different instruments, which now I decided to play the world music. No longer the music that I was playing. I decided to play world music. Why I decided to play music, I wanted also to be known, worldwide by the music that I'm playing. One other friend of mine said that, Dizu, let's make a library music. Then I did this library music. Hey, I'm telling you, this album is going like hotcakes, man. All those producers from different parts of the corners of the world, they are using that music. It's only now that I could see better royalties coming. One thing that we've got to understand, in our continent in Africa, it's like we are being brainwashed about our music to ignore what is yours. Not to like your brother, not to love your continent, not to love your country. As a result, what are we doing? We all copy things from the West. So I, for one, I decided to move totally. Now I'm doing totally different music because I need money. I've got kids to support. I cannot play music and wait for some monies that I don't know where are they gonna come and so on. I do things whereby I could support my family and my people, because wages that I've got is not only for me and my family. I've got community students in the townships that they don't have no cent, no instrument. I've got to fulfill and see what I can do with that.
World music is a currency of creative expression that can be internationally recognized. It's often a compromise. It doesn't have to be a compromise, but it often is. There was a formula, an unspoken formula in world music, although it has been written about in academic circles. It goes something like, something familiar that has a touch of exotic or a touch of spirituality that might be related to indigenous belief systems, but still the overall package is that of cosmopolitan, that of international, that of something familiar, drums, bass, guitar, keyboards, maybe horns. So there's that element. World music in the 90s was really overall, I think, positive for a lot of African artists because there was then a platform that was recognized and accepted and sought after. So artists like Youssou N'Dour and then Thomas Mapfumo is a great example of the world music scene at that time in the 90s and into the 2000s. Once 2008 happened, the world music basically disappeared, if not just transformed to kind of go into the periphery. But Thomas Mapfumo had, one sound for Zimbabwe and one sound for abroad. And a lot of artists did that. Remy Ongala to Tanzania did as well. Baba Mao, Senegal, did as well. You can see interviews that they discussed how producers would manipulate their sound. Sometimes they liked it, sometimes they didn't. Bundu Boys out of Zimbabwe is another example. So then you have the international markets that are pushing the creative agency of African musicians. And that still occurs, and so that's one thing to be wary of as an artist of any background, is to keep in mind where you stand as a creative performer. You're creating from inside of you to share. And then if you want to broaden your audience, how do you want to approach that from a creative standpoint? How much do you want to affect your sound in the recording studio to expand your audience? And how much do you not want to do that? There was an interesting article, academic article I read on Senegalese hip-hop and hybridity, and how in Senegal and abroad, Senegalese hip-hop musicians don't even necessarily think about them doing hybrid music. And that was another thing that I noticed in Cape Town years ago at a music conference, but more like for professionals, not like academic. Not everybody wants to play African music. Not everybody wants to play world music who's coming from this part of the world. Not everybody wants to be, if they're coming from Malawi or South Africa or Zimbabwe, a Malawian, Zimbabwean, or South African musician. They want to be a hip-hop musician. They want to be a pop musician. They want to be a jazz musician. They want to be a great guitarist, not a great African guitarist. And these are creative decisions that are up to the individual, and I think anybody in the industry and any audience members who are seeking out artists, keep in mind that the artists are still creative, and it's important to really seek out what they have to say. And you might start with something that's familiar, right? One of the things about the world music sound is foreigners, international people may want to hear something authentic, but they might be surprised to find out that they are gravitating towards something which is a little bit polished, so it might not be authentic, and that's okay. Follow your genuine interests, your genuine likes. I like this because it reminds me of 90s hip hop in the US. And then you go from there. Then you go maybe to a griot tradition. Then you go to maybe a totally acoustic kora player that's not produced. Listen to field recordings you can get online. Expand your interests, and vice versa for, I think, musicians as well. Expand your interests and push your sound in different directions by being curious, always being curious. I noticed around that time, as it turned out, in 2008, 2009, I was doing doctoral work and trying to figure out, get funding to do research, blah, blah, blah. And I was trying to refamiliarize myself with sort of African pop music, what's going on, what are the trends. And I'm trying to find magazines, right, world music magazines. And, there was probably 4 or 5 really solid publications that specialized in world music. Some specialized in African music, and some, different sort of regions, but it was world music. And then I looked at, like, this one discontinued in 2005, this one discontinued in 2008, etc. 2008, though, incidentally, the market crashes in the US, and that resonated internationally. So much of what happens in the US politically and economically has effects internationally. And so, the 2008 banking crisis, economic crisis, housing crisis that sort of emerged in the US, I think had an effect. And world music was no longer, a priority. When you have economic stability, when you have a degree of comfort, you can pursue interests based out of curiosity rather than need. And so I think this is just conjecture right now, but I think that was a variable. Well, US and UK, those markets are linked anyways, but those were 2 driving forces. And in the UK, we had Peter Gabriel and Real World Records and the WOMAD Festival, and you also had, I don't know if David Byrne is from the UK, but in my brain I'm thinking Europe for him. I could be wrong. But that was another strong force in promoting world music on that side of the ocean. And then in the US, of course, it was LA and New York. Of course. I think the no-nonsense answer is yeah, but then to actually unpack what that looks like on the ground. So let me just speculate for a second. So between being in Malawi, I went there, came back, went back. In the middle there, I was in the Bay Area of California, so this is San Francisco area. Berkeley, Oakland. And there was a really strong African music scene there. Mostly Nigerian, some Ghanaian, hints of Zimbabwe. But it was a scene, it was a vibe. There was clubs, there was 3 or 4 clubs that did world music, right? And so international acts came through. Youssou N'Dour came through, Bundu Boys came through, Maslatini and Maotela Queens came through, Baba Mal came through. That was a stop, right? That was a stop. So if you think the touring in the US, it's basically the coast plus Chicago, maybe St. Louis, right? In the West, there's not many big cities. So you've got New York, Chicago, St. Louis, maybe Denver, San Francisco, LA. So that takes you across the US, and then you can go from there. Now, if the economy is not doing well, people are not going to go out to see that music. Record companies are not going to be able to promote that type of music in those clubs. It's going to be the broader, less eclectic music where there's sort of a kind of a built-in market. Yeah, I don't know. So that's one trajectory that you can think about where a general market decline could affect world music. Let me add to that, it's not just the economy as far as people having spending money. Obviously, there's a big part of it. But just think about simple things like infrastructure. If you want people to go out to see music, there has to be safe, reliable transportation to and from those areas. And when you get to those areas, it helps that there's maybe spots to eat or multiple places in a row that you can, go see some music here, go eat somewhere else, get some drinks here, go back see the last set or something like that. There has to be the infrastructure as well. Public transport and safe environments is a major issue. And so in terms of boosting maybe live music in African countries, and my experience is mostly Malawi, to be frank, and then followed by South Africa. Some efforts to do that would be to maybe community efforts to deal with public transit, community efforts to deal with night spots that can accommodate youth and older crowds, both all genders, right? Because you can't have spaces that are dominated by men and expect that to be welcoming to women who just want to see music. And at the end of the day, you want as many people to enjoy your music and to feel safe to do that and to be able to do that whenever they want. If it's a 10 o'clock show, you want them to be able to be safe and go there and come back. So I think that can be managed on a local level and not necessarily relying on the national economy. So another thing that is worthy of attention for everybody, but coming from somebody who's lived in Malawi and South Africa, music business conversations are pretty accessible in the U.S. because you have access to internet, you can get trade magazines, there's a scene, and the scenes here are not always hip to the latest things. I mean, think about revenue streams. Look, piracy has been a problem in the U.S. for decades, just like it has in Africa. And the move from cassettes and CDs, like almost immediately, very quickly to MP3s and internet-based recording, that was a tremendous hit in Africa because the economies are different than the U.S. It doesn't always translate to free advertising. So you can use free music, sure, to advertise and raise yourself up, but then eventually you need to have other revenue streams. Now, primarily, it's been live music. That was the same thing that happened in the U.S., so it shouldn't have been a surprise to Malawian musicians, for instance, or African musicians. It was understandably so because access to information is not, always equal. But, that happened in the U.S. first, and then they became this trend of the 360 deal, where record companies, instead of just doing the recording contract, it was recording, licensing, merchandise, the whole multiple revenue streams. And so I think maybe even up and coming musicians forget about it as like you can just put your logo on shirts or, think about other revenue streams. Think about teaching, think about picking up a couple students, thinking about giving talks. It might not always work. There might not always be an outlet for that. But the mentality of live music and records as the only income source that's old fashioned. And we have to stop thinking about that even as non-signed artists. Artists that don't have sponsorship or don't have a record company backing still have a lot of avenues to look for marketing. And don't forget that when you write a composition, look through the avenues of licensing that to maybe not major studios that are like film studios, but there's a lot of independent film people, like network across mediums, right? Oh, you're doing this independent film, or you doing this documentary, I'm doing this music, maybe we can do something to collaborate and license the music. This is not an expertise area of mine, but this is the type of knowledge that I think is underused in a lot of the smaller economies. So maximize revenue streams. There's more than just recordings and live performance.